Oh, howdy ho, guys, and welcome to another Virginian vlog. How y'all doing? This entry is going to be the second part of the two-entry recording session I did today. In the previous entry, I talked about how sensitivity and energy is something that we all need. You know, a trust in how we feel and what truly motivates us. You know, to look behind the addictive behavior or whatever it might be, and to discover what we truly want, what we truly desire. And I think that's very important because there's a lot of shame and guilt surrounding it. You know, there's a lot of shame and guilt. Like, it's so muddy and thick and viscous that like it almost makes me want to puke. You know, but like that's what we got to do, right? And this entry is going to go into a bit of an extension, where I'm going to talk about. Essentially it's the same concept, the same kind of idea, the same kind of message, but like it's I've written down here the collapse of right and wrong, which isn't to say that right and wrong isn't going to be something that we talk about anymore, but like rather it's something that we don't place so much emphasis in. So a few months ago, I think, or maybe longer, I did an entry about like language and symbolism and things like that, and you know, that kind of ties into what I'm saying here, where we are becoming more sensitive to our energy and becoming less attached to concepts and ideas and positions, you know, mental positions. Because right and wrong ultimately is not, it doesn't really matter, you know, because right and wrong is always going to change, you know. You know, like we like to think, a lot of people like to think that like there's absolute right and there's absolute wrong, but like the truth is that like it's not as simple as that, you know. And thinking that way gets us into a lot of unnecessary heartache and pain, basically. But yeah, and so like, you know, going on from what I talked about in the previous entry, you know, I kind of essentially postulate that a lot of the problems that we face in society, you know, of course this is nothing new. I've said this many times in previous entries, but like a lot of the big reason why we get into a lot of the kind of problems that we do in modern society is because we don't trust our feelings. You know, it's really as simple as that, you know. We have become far too cerebral in society. Again, not to say that cerebralness is wrong, not to say that logic and science is wrong, because there is a place for it, you know, like, you could swing the complete opposite direction and be too animalistic almost, you know, where like, you kind of forego all of the amazing gifts that human beings have, you know, having like a prefrontal cortex and like having the ability to kind of be self-aware and to analyze things, you know. You know, it's ultimately a balance, you know, but like it's an equilibrium. But like the observation that I make, and that I'm sure that you make in society, is that like, you know, people are just far too insensitive to like their feelings. You know, they don't trust their feelings enough, if at all, sometimes. You know, in favor of like something that like sounds like it makes sense. You know, if you will. And at the core of this, you know, like I mentioned the axis of perception in my previous entry, which is a concept I coined. And again, you know, just to recap again, you know, it's this kind of like disconnect between what is on the surface and what is beneath the surface. You know, what is symbolic and what is kind of energetic, in the sense of what does it mean? You know, what is the context for it? You know, like, what happens when we kind of get overly attached on mental positions and ideas and concepts is that it kind of stagnates us, right? And this is something that's very difficult to accept, you know, like even in my experience, you know, I like to think of myself as someone who's like quite open to change, relatively speaking, and quite you know, willing to explore differing things, if you know, like, 'cause why not, you know, why the fuck not? But it's ultimately very challenging when, like, you know, it's, you know, the very things you know, like I made an entry about, you know, what is your spiritual truth right now, you know, where I say, you know, essentially like, what is your ultimate spiritual truth right now? That's going to be wrong eventually. Or rather, like the way that you think about it, the perspective that you take on it is going to at some point change. No matter how right or how like all-encompassing it seems, at some point, like, you know, your perspective is going to shift. You know, the cosmic perspective is going to shift. At some point, we're no longer going to expand as a universe, and we're going to start to contract. You know, that's just how things are. And so, energetic stagnation is the real enemy. It's the real thing that causes so many problems in our lives. Is when we get too fixed on certain things, you know. So, like, for example, you know, like I'm pretty clear about what I love. You know, I'm pretty clear about who I am. But like, I know I always have the thought that at some point I'm going to have to do something different. You know, and you know, even in my daily experience, you know, like, you know, because I'm thinking that like once I, you know, in the near future, like I'm going to kind of change my lifestyle so that like I start to really focus on my music, right? Because like that's something that I really want to do, and I really want to focus on and get really good at, become a master in. And so I'm picturing myself like, you know, like getting really good and practicing every day, you know, becoming a real expert in the kind of music that I want to be good at and love. But like at some point, I'm going to have to do something different, you know. At some point, I'm going to have to put, you know, like, even though, like, you know, I'm really focused and I'm, like, you know, doing my music thing, at some point, I'm going to have to put my music down and learn a martial art or something. Or, like, go to some random place I've never been to, right? Or, like, even do something that I wouldn't normally do, right? And, of course, like, this also ties into an entry I did called Taste Guided Discovery. You know, where I essentially said, you know, like, find the things that you really love, right? But like, even once you found it, and you know, that's a very important step. You know, like that's a very, very important step. Like, find what you really love, clarify your desire, clarify your passion. But then, like, once you have that kind of that kind of home space, once you've kind of established that foundation, that home sweet home, like you still have to be open to new experiences and differing perspectives, right? In my experience, right, I have been the most at peace when I have explored as many perspectives as I can, right? No matter how noble it may seem at the time, no matter how kind of like infallible, like a certain tenet that I have in my mind seems, like when I'm overly rigid about a certain idea or concept or truth or principle or paradigm that I have in my mind, that's when I tend to kind of start to kind of go down in my experience, right? And it's only when I finally say, oh, you know what, okay, humor me. You know, like, maybe there's something I'm missing here. You know, when that happens, like that's when like I have an epiphany, or like when I have like a sudden boost of energy, and like I kind of get unstuck, right? So again, like when I explain it like that, like it sounds a bit brutal. You know, like sometimes when I hear like other spiritual teachers talk about like, you know, like for example, like Matt Kahn did an entry about this like quite a while ago. I think it was called like recycling energy, or like a recirculating energy or something like that. And this is essentially what he means, is that like, you know, you can get stuck doing the same thing no matter how much you love it, no matter how safe it makes you. If you cut yourself off from like new experiences and, you know, that, and like, you know, just like, yeah, you know, the chaos of life, as it were, like, you kind of get stagnant, right? You get stuck in a rut. And when I hear it, like him talking about this, like it kind of triggers me slightly, because it's like or rather it kind of perturbs me slightly, because it's like, oh man, but like, does that mean I have to I have to always be changing, and like I always have to like try new things? It sounds like a fucking headache, right? And it doesn't have to necessarily be that way, you know. The thing is, like, it all goes down to how much you trust in your feeling and in your experience, right? Because the more that you can trust your feeling, the less difficult this whole circulating energy thing becomes, right? Because ultimately it is like, you know, it is when we start to get a bit scared, or like when we start to resist a certain part of ourselves, that we kind of park ourselves a bit, because we're like, hold on, I don't like that, you know, like let's fuck that, you know, fuck that, like let's just keep doing this thing, because this is what we're supposed to be doing, you know, like that's just a distraction, right? But the thing is that, like, no matter what it is, like, and this is a bit subtle, because like sometimes that can appear in the form of negative emotion or like a trigger, right? But like, and how we usually respond with triggers is that we tend to suppress, we tend to escape, we tend to try and sweep it under the rug and ignore it. But like sometimes what needs to happen is that, like, we might get triggered, and like what we need to do is we need to tap into our sensitivity and go into our darkness. You know, our bodies are calling us back into it. It's into our pain, so that we can then basically move on to the next thing, you know, in our experience, right? Because when, you know, when we feel pain, you know, instinctively, like, we try and like numb it out with something, which we like. The most common thing probably for people in the personal development spirituality field is like they rationalize that, like, oh no, like I don't want to deal with that shit. It's like, for example, if someone like pisses you off, or like someone just makes you feel really like shitty, you know, like, and you're just like, ah, oh, like, forget that person, you know, like they're not worth my time. Like, I need to focus on this, you know, this is what I need to focus on. But like eventually you start to kind of burn out slightly, because you go into a place of forced willpower, I call it, where you're just like trying to force yourself to focus on this one thing, but like the pain is growing, the pain is fucking growing, and the trigger is like, you're like, until one day you're like, you know, okay, fuck this, you know, like I feel shit, I need to do something about this, and like whatever it might be, even if it is to gorge on junk food, or like to do something, to go and masturbate or something, you know, to like go on a porn binge, you know, like whatever it might be, that is your body essentially like connecting and processing the pain, you know, and that is, like I mentioned, a form of your body, like the form of the energy, you know, the kind of torrent of energy within you, like starting to kind of crash through the dam that you put up, right? And so, yeah, you know, like, so this is really, all it is a bit of a perspective, because, like, you know, it's just tricky, you know, like, I wish that I could be like, I want to be in full control of how I feel 100% of the time. I want it to be where, like, when I feel triggered, I can just be like, poof, and like the negative emotion goes away, and I feel fine, you know, and I can always be in a state of love and bliss. And it's like, no, it doesn't happen like that, you know. When you get triggered, like, you try your best to fucking suppress that shit, but it, like, yeah, you know. But like, you slowly learn to connect with your pain. You know, the more pain you experience, you know, the more that you become a big boy or a big girl, like the more that you have to face your pain, and like the better you get at it. Like, particularly if you're someone who's conscious, like it's something that's it becomes actually somewhat enjoyable, empowering, because it's like this one thing that you're scared of, you know, like, you know, being triggered and all of that stuff, you know, it's like you spend your whole life running away from it, but when you could finally face it, even though it's scary, it's empowering, because it feels like nothing can touch you, you know, because, like, you know, ultimately the only thing that we ever deal with as human beings is fear and pain, when it comes down to it. And if you can master connecting with your fear and pain and being vulnerable to that side of you, and letting it just like burn its way through you, and as Teal Swan calls it, committing suicide to the emotion. Like it is empowering because you're like, I like fear is here, but I am not its slave. I am not its prisoner. You know, I am in control of it. You know, like again, that's the like I talked about like the weird irony that exists in life, the weird kind of paradox in life, where like when you try to force something to be the case, it doesn't work, right? When you're feeling shit or you're in pain and you try to make yourself, you try to force yourself to feel better, it doesn't work. Or at the very least, or at most, it's temporary. But like when you just let go of the attachment to feeling better and the resistance to feeling bad, then like paradoxically, ironically, you then feel better afterwards. It's trippy, and so like it's not a cerebral thing, because the mind just wants to fix things and for things to be like fixed, but like it doesn't work like that, you know. And so yeah. So actually, there was something else I wanted to talk about, like because I mentioned it in one of my previous entries that like there was something I wanted to talk about. Which I'm trying to remember what it was. Force goodness, organic goodness, the pitfall of cerebral intelligence. Yeah, it's a tricky thing, you know, like human shadow, as Teal calls it, you know, the ego and all of that stuff. It's like, yeah, it's tough being conscious because like you have to not only talk the talk but walk the walk as well. But it's really rewarding though. Like, you know, you get no one else's validation for it, but it's very rewarding, you know. Yeah, so there was probably something else I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah. Stephen Covey. Yeah, of course. Okay, so Stephen Covey. I mentioned Stephen Covey in my entry about community and Donald Trump, right? I don't know if I was supposed to do that in the previous entry of this one, but like I'll kind of talk about it in this entry, I guess. But Stephen Covey, in his book *The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People*, he talks about something called win-win. Seek to understand first before being understood, and interdependency, right? And this is very, 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 very powerful stuff. You know, it's very difficult and it's very kind of like irritating because it's like, you know, it's very difficult to do, but like, it is nonetheless very, very, very powerful, right? And I guess this isn't really related to what I'm talking about this entry, but I thought just humor me here. Like this is kind of like a thing I'm just kind of tacking on the end, but like, so seek first to understand before being understood. That is very, very, very difficult, you know. But when it does happen, like magical shit happens, you know. Like both parties no longer feel like a victim, like they're unheard and unappreciated, and it's the beginnings of like harmony, you know. Like it's beginnings of bonding and vulnerability and like and belonging, right? But it's very difficult, and the reason it's difficult is because like of the so-called crabs in a bucket mentality, which is of course predicated on scarcity. So like because most people are starved, you know, and they're poor, and they're unconscious, right, and they're coping, they don't have the facility to get to a place of security where they can then seek to understand before being understood. Because like the secret behind why that is so difficult is because like, particularly if you're an empath like me, you know, like it's difficult to do that when you yourself are starved, you know. It's really difficult, you know. like, it is almost an impossibility. Like, it is almost a literal impossibility to give a shit about anyone else if you yourself are starved. You know, like, it's like, and like, you know, us empaths, we try to, like, no, like, I don't want to be like that. I just, I can't be selfish, like, I have to see it from other people's perspective, I don't want to be a selfish dickhead. But the thing is, like, even as we try and force ourselves to be empathetic and sympathetic to other people, like, the narcissism that's spawned from starvation still comes through, right? And so, like, the secret is that, like, it's kind of like a kind of a swinging kind of like a, where where you kind of swing each other up and up and up. It's like, basically, you have to learn to nourish yourself, right? So you have to do what you love, know what you love, pinpoint what exactly it is that you love, and go and do it, right? And then slowly build your life around what you love. That's one prerequisite. You have to do that. The second prerequisite is that you also, when the opportunity presents itself and you have the kind of inner resources to help someone, you help them, right? But, like, you don't help them, and this is the kind of key, like, particularly with, like, people pleasers like me, is like, you have to really help them and not just supplicate to them. Not just kind of disarm them. Because, like, sometimes, like, let's just be nice. I just want to be nice as a person. And it feels really genuine because you're being nice to them. Like, just like, let me just be polite and nice to them and make their day in that way. But, like, when there's conflict and stuff like that, like, that doesn't work. It just forms like a really kind of annoying and irritating kind of dynamic between you and the other person. What you need to do, to really kind of, like, get it so that, like, you pull the other person up along with you, is that, like, you have to kind of pinpoint what they desire and give it to them. Or otherwise present and implement a solution that really drives lasting change and leaves a permanent impression on them. That's what you got to do, right? But, like, and so, like, it is an inversion of thinking. Instead of short-term validation and short-term survival and coping, it is kind of like looking at the long term, basically. And so, like, sometimes you have to kind of just come up with, like, a bit of resistance, But, like, you don't necessarily have to respond in a defensive way, because that never usually works, that well. It might be good in the sense that you own yourself and you don't suppress yourself, but, like, in terms of, like, coexistence, like, it's not the most helpful thing at all. But sometimes, but you can just be confident in your stance, in your love for yourself, and it's not a narcissistic kind of a love. It's because it's not like you're not looking to take what you need and leave everyone else, like, high and dry, right? You're looking to nourish yourself and then to connect with other people and to find out what it is that they need and to then provide it to them, right? Because, like, if we're to discuss on how we can actually change the way that we live and to, like, improve society, the only real way I can think of is to, like, really just be really specific about what it is that we really want, right? And then to help each other achieve that, And, like, in the short term, that there might be a bit of conflict. Like, there might be, like, I don't really want that, and, like, I don't really want that. And, like, there might be a bit of, like, a awkwardness because, you find out that you're not compatible with everyone. And that's fucking scary, and, like, it's why I stay inauthentic sometimes. Like, I kind of revert back to my inauthenticities because sometimes, like, you find out that you're not compatible with everyone. Particularly if, like, someone who looks up to you or something, and, like, they find out, oh shit, this person does this, or thinks this, I don't think I like them anymore. You know, it's like there's always that kind of danger there. There's always that fear, but like, you know, ultimately we just have to. There always has to be a bit of compromise when you're with other people, but I think we can make things a lot better by doing things this way. You know, but it's like it doesn't have to be like we don't have to be. I'm a pretty picky person. You know, I'm very, very picky. I'm very clear about what I like, what I don't like. And so, like, I imagine that I'm someone who would be very difficult to live with, or like to, you know. But like, having said that, like, I wouldn't mind sacrificing a bit if we could, you know, and compromise a bit if like we could just kind of like get most of it right. If I could be like 70 or 80% in touch with who I am and what I love, the other, I don't give, like, you know, the other 20 or 30%, I don't mind compromising, giving it up for someone. It's just that the problem is that in this society, like, we have to settle with like maybe like 10 or 20% of what we actually like. And so we're trying to please other people, but it just doesn't fucking work, you know, because like we're so starved. It's ridiculous, right? And so, yeah, you know, like, so that, you know, that's the kind of general concept that I wanted to give, really. It's just like, you know, how do we... And it comes from my own experience, really. You know, like, a lot of this comes from my own experiences. Like, I read like, Stephen Covey's book, like, back in when I was uni, I think. Or, like, around that time. Maybe a bit after uni. But, like, even that was, like, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And it didn't really hit me until, like, recently, you know, this year. That, like, you know, sometimes, like, you just, because, you know, I've made an entry about aggressive versus passive people. Like, I'm very much a passive person, you know, like, my instinct is to just blank people and ignore people whenever, like, it gets this, you know, uncomfortable for me. That's just how I am, you know, but like, sometimes it's like, well, I can't just go my whole life ignoring and blanking people and running away. Like, sometimes I just have to connect, but, like, if I am to connect, like, I want to really connect and to be completely honest. And if we can't work things out between individual people, then, like, let's help each other find other individuals. You know, which is you know, a major reason why, like, I'd say that community is a must, because, you know, in this society that kind of is a bit devoid of community, in that, like, we're very segregated, we don't have a lot of choice in terms of, like, who we can go to in order to, like, kind of, like, indulge certain sides of us. Whereas if we were in a big community, right, where, like, everyone knew each other and, like, everyone was on, you know, good terms, like, if we can kind of, like, do things with different people. Right, because, like, the thing that I'm scared of, and the thing that, like, most people, like, wish was the case, but, like, it just really isn't, is, like, you know, a soulmate that is completely compatible with you, and, like, they love everything that you like, and you know, you're completely 100% like a match. No, it just doesn't work like that, you know. Like, it really, like, no one is like you. You are unique, and so, like, the only viable solution is to have many different connections available to you. You know, and a lot of people may hear this and be, like, immediately triggered. But, like, I think it is the only way. You know, I think it is the only way. Because you can't force complete compatibility with someone when there isn't that compatibility in the first place. But, and at the same time, like, because that's what most people settle for, you know, is they settle for these like, kind of monogamous relationships. Not only romantic, but in terms of, like, familial relationships, friendships. And the problem is that, like, you know, like, one party really wants to express a certain side of them, or to indulge a certain interests that they have. But the other party doesn't give a shit, right? And, like, you know, it's trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, kind of a thing. I think the only real solution is community, because like we can then be more free to kind of express ourselves, but also to connect with each other, you know, and not feel like we're either being forced to do something that we don't like, or to be scared that like once the person that we're committed to leaves, we're all out of connections, you know. I think the only real solution is community, you know. But of course, community is not going to appear overnight. You know, we're not going to just click our fingers and then suddenly like we're surrounded by people that we know and that we love, and like, you know, it's like this massive 200-person community that we can, you know, lean on. No. You know, it's all about taking the right step. So like, you know, the right step for me, and I'm sure for many of you watching this is, or whoever's watching this, I shouldn't say many, but I'm not at that stage yet. But like, is to find the people that you resonate with, first and foremost, so that you have at least people that like really get you, you know, like 70 to 80% get you, and then start to like build a circle of other people who might be acquaintances, who might be like people who at least commit to consciousness, you know, who aren't like, you know, fucking like wasting away in a bar somewhere, you know, or in a dead-end job, you know, people who are relatively conscious, but like, you know, then you can start to build these communities, right, where like at least people are conscious, at the very fucking least, you know. The baseline is that everyone is conscious, everyone, and like, you know, again, you know, we can start to, once we find our tribes, you know, people who really get us, we can then start to agree on common values and common goals and common intentions and things like that, common systems, you know. A good example of this is like, I didn't meet him, I saw him in the flesh, but like Shaft Udin. If you have never watched the Vice documentary on like unicorns in London, I urge you to watch it, because it's amazing, you know. And I met the kind of ringleader, if you will, of that, and he's an awesome guy, you know, and like he has like these like commandments. I think he calls them like the laws of unicornia or something like that. I might be completely butchering that, so like I apologize in advance, but like he has these commandments, and like it's like these values basically that people go by, and like, you know, it's the same thing, you know, like we all get to agree as a community. You know, we start off with like a core kind of like tribe of people, and then we like establish some rules, right, and then we form a community that way, and like that's how we do it. And so easier said than done, but like, you know, that's the kind of game plan basically going towards the future. But yeah, that was my entry. I hope that it was insightful as always, and you got something out of it. Yeah, life is crazy right now for me, but like it's definitely moving in the right direction for me. So I hope you guys are also doing well on your journeys. Yeah, so hope you're having a great day, and I love you. Thank you very much for watching this, and I will catch you guys in the next Bojin vlog. Catch you guys later. Good night. Bye. Love you.